Hello and welcome. I'm working on trying to repair a Sony TC-WR720A dual tape deck from the 1988, 1990, somewhere in there. This tape deck uses two of the TCM-190 transports, and according to tapeheads.net, is quite a problematic device to be able to maintain its function after so many years. A couple of reported problems include the head belts coming loose and the belts failing, turning to goo. The other thing that's problematic is a little weight gear that's on the reverse and rewind and playback mechanisms. So we'll take a look at those things as we take this apart, but first let's get the transports out of the housing. So in this case, what we've got is a dual tape deck with there's two transports, and I'm going to go ahead and flip the unit over and remove the screws that are on the bottom. We have a center screw here, and then there's a screw in each of the feet. So go ahead and remove those two screws as well. Now this whole front face will come off, but there's a number of ribbon cables and other connectors that we need to disconnect before we get in there. So once we get these three screws out, we'll go ahead and flip the unit back over and take a look at the ribbon cables that are on the other side. So again, this is a dual transport unit that uses the TCM-190 transports. So again, this is got a number of ribbon cables and some other smaller white connectors. And what I want to do is go through and label these before I start to disconnect them. There's 10 of these white ones all together, and then there's a couple of little looks like power cables that are in there, and then there's even an audio cable. So I'll go ahead and label these ribbon cables starting with 1, and then this one will be number 2. And I'm writing the numbers on the circuit boards as well, so that I can keep track. And then number 3 is down here near the front, and we'll go ahead and number all of those. All right, so here's how I've numbered them. 1, 2, you can see 3 down there. There's number 3 right on top of the ribbon cable. Number 4 is there. Number 5 is up here. There's 7, and then down here is number 7, and then down here is number 6, and then 8, and then 9, and then 10 is over here at the side. Then I've got a power connector there. There's the heads connector here. This one actually connects to the main circuit board in the front, but I'm labeling and marking the sides of the connectors so I can get those back in the same orientation. All right, unplugging ribbon cables just means pulling each of these ribbon cables out and just making sure that I pull gently and straight up on each of those. There is a little plastic tab that's you can grab and pull, so I'm trying to do that if I can, but basically just gently pulling out each of these ribbon cables to get them disconnected. Now I'm going to work on the little plastic connector, and then let's see if we can zoom in on this one. Yeah, there's 2 little plastic clips that are on either side of this, and unfortunately I sort of get my hand in the way, but we'll disconnect those. Let's see, there's yeah, that's where the heads wires connect on that back of that circuit board. So I've got the 2 transports here, and I'm going to move the chassis out of the way, and let's see if we can get one of the transports at least off of this base plate here. So it looks like there are some metal brackets along the top that probably hold the case top on. So those are these long brackets here, and then there's 4 screws that hold the transport in itself. We also have to remove the doors on the front to be able to get the door mechanism open so that we can slide the transport out. So let's see. In order to open the door mechanism, there's a little white tab that's on this side of the transport, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. The transport flip switch right there is to open the door, but there's a little white tab that needs to be moved out of the way. There it is right there. So I'm just going to slide that little tab out of the way, and then once I slide that out of the way, then I can trigger the mechanism and pop the door open. And that should open the door on the other side. Yeah, you can see that mechanism moving, and then there's the door open, and I can then slide the plastic cover off the front by grabbing it carefully and pulling upwards, squeezing upwards to pop that off. And so that's the way we can get that cover off. Let's check the other side. It looks like there's a mirror image of that door opening mechanism and the white label little lever there. See if I can see it. Yeah, the little white lever there needs to be moved out of the way as well on that transport. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, move that white lever out of the way, and then we can open up the door on that side as well. Now, it's interesting with these mechanisms, some parts are mirror image like these door mechanisms, but the rest of the transports are the same for both the left and the right general mechanism. So they didn't mirror image the entire mechanism, only certain components like these door opening pieces here. So I'll go ahead and trigger that lever there, and then let's see if we can't get this other door open. And the reason why is that doors don't open is because they don't want you to open the doors with the power off, or in the case of the mechanism actually running, you don't want to be able to open the door. So those are sort of locked in place until you power the unit up. All right, so there's the other door. We'll set that to the side. And let's see if we can get the screws for the brackets then off of this object and the base plate, and see if we can't get it together here. So let's start with these two that hold these little metal brackets in. And as it turns out, I don't think we need to remove these little brackets, but I did it anyway. You can see there's a little groove on the bottom side there that sort of catches the lid of the whole case, and it was good for me to remove these anyway because I noticed a couple of them were a little bit bent, and I was able to straighten them out once I put it back together. All right, so the little screws are the same for these brackets as well as mounting the mechanism. So with that bracket off to the side, we're going to go ahead and start to take the transport out. So again, on this TCM-190 unit, it's held in with 4 screws, and then we'll need to, with that door open, sort of get that door tipped and pulled out so that we can pull the mechanism out of the front plate. So I'm trying to keep all the screws sort of organized over onto the side where I'm taking them out in groupings. So in this case, the 6 screws, 2 for the bracket and the 4 for the transport, are being pulled out and set to the side in a particular order so that I can put them back together, back into the unit in the same order. Some people use little magnetic trays or egg cartons or things like that. I've just got them off to the side on the table, and not necessarily the best because in some cases it's easy to elbow them off of the table, but it seems to work for me for the simple repairs that I like to do here. All right, there's what the screws look like, and with those sort of pulled and out of the way, then we can start to loosen that mechanism. There's no tape counter or anything like that that's connected to these, so we don't really have to worry about that. In some cases, some tape decks have a tape counter that has a little belt that goes off to the side. In fact, I was working on an MCS tape deck the other day that the little belt going to the tape counter was the thing that actually did the auto shut off. Okay, so here we pull out the mechanism. You can see it just comes right out of that faceplate. And we'll go ahead and get the faceplate out of the way and then take a look at what we've got here. So there's several layers to this. There's the front plate where the reels mount, and you can see the head mechanism at the bottom, and the head has a curious sort of rotational thing where the head rotates left or right for the dual direction for the tape deck. There's a whitish sort of base plate for the motor and everything to mount on, and there's two motors on this unit, and it looks like there's, if we remove this base plate, we should be able to get everything taken out. And so I'm trying to figure out where things are mounted. It looks like there's a couple of little maybe brackets, screws. Let's see, there's some screws on this side, and then there's some little catches on the other side. At the top here are the little, these are the sensors that determine whether the tape is in the unit and whether or not the record is locked or not. There's our eject mechanism and that little white lever I was showing you earlier, and how that locks or doesn't lock. And so I'm just trying to determine how this base plate is sort of attached. So it looks like back here on the bottom side there's two screws that are mounted to through that whitish plate and into the metal back plate behind the reels. So let's see if we can get that out. There's another screw and another couple screws, but I'm not sure they all need to come out. So we'll start with these two screws here, and then it looks like there's a couple of little, maybe like brackets that sort of hold the rest in. It's always good to look around and see what's happening and how these things are held together before you start taking them apart. Another good thing for videotaping a mechanism like this is that you can rewind and watch the mechanism as it comes apart in case you mess up and need to put things back together. So we'll go ahead and remove these two screws for the this beige, I don't know if it's beige or white. I guess it was probably white at one time, but it's this sort of beige mounting plate for the motors and most of the mechanism there. So we'll go ahead and take those little screws out. This little screwdriver I'm using has a magnetic sort of head, so it's easy to grab the screws out magnetically. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. These are very long, thin screws here. So I'm just noting the length of the screw there and trying to determine whether they're different as I pull them out. It's a good idea, again, by laying the screws out in order, it helps you to get them back in a particular order. So it looks like those two screws are the same length. And all right, now we're going to take a look and see if it comes loose. Well, it's a little bit looser, but something else is still sort of holding that in place. I'd like to think that I could just tip it up, but I'm gently prying, and something else seems to be holding it all, like in the middle, somewhere in the middle of that whole beige plate. So as I sort of look around, trying to determine if there's a screw coming in from the front or maybe the back. You see there's two stacked circuit boards there, and maybe there's a extra connector sort of in one of those circuit boards. See on the back there's a couple of like catches that hold in the back, but there might be something else that's just holding this whole thing in. There's like a little black bracket there. So I'm just going to do a little investigating here and try to maybe get this black little bracket loose. Maybe that's like a squeezy thing that's holding it. And so I'm going to squeeze that thing, and I'm not sure if that's what it is or not. Let's keep looking around. There's another one on this side. No, that seems to be like still stuck. That I don't think that's what's holding the motors in, or this base plate. So there looks like there's a post that goes up through the middle. So maybe there's another screw in there. I'm going to try to take this top circuit board out. Again, it has these little squeezy plastic connectors. So let's see if we can get one of these loose. These things are 40 years old, 30 years old, and they don't want to come out so easily. So I'm going to try this one on the other side. Maybe there's a ribbon connector that connects these two circuit boards right there, and so maybe this is the one to take apart to get this top circuit board out of the way. So a little squeezing, a little prying, and I'm going to try to get this top circuit board loosened up. These dang ribbon cables are popping everywhere, but I don't want to take those out either, because I just want to make sure that I keep everything together as much as I can as I'm going. If I start taking the ribbon cables out, then it's very easy to mess up which one is facing which direction and where it goes and all that. So I'm going to try to leave all those there. Yeah. Again, it's really hard to get these little plastic things loosened. All right, let's try the other one. I think it's the other one that's needs to be undone. It seems like there's some other kind of post or squeezy thing. It's really curious the way they put these. Can you imagine like engineering these kinds of things and how they all go together? It must have taken forever to come up with a mechanism that would function in all the ways that they wanted to. In this case, these are auto reverse functions for these mechanisms. So there's quite a lot of mechanism in there that causes the tape to play in both directions. The tape head actually swivels around depending on the direction that you're going. And then the auto reverse will reverse obviously the take up reel and the supply reel. And then there's an auto shutoff mechanism that's in there. All right, so I finally got this one post unloosened here, and at the same time got the ribbon cable disconnected. And that was it. That allows me to swing this circuit board out of the way, and then sure enough, deep inside there is a screw that's holding the second circuit board down. And let's go ahead and get that screw out. And it kind of looks like it was the same kind of screw as the other two. Yep, look at that, long and skinny. So I want to make sure that those are all the same. Obviously, I don't want to swap them, so let's compare them. Yeah, they all look to be the same for the different screw lengths. So now let's see if we can get this mechanism a little bit looser. Yep, I can get the circuit boards up out of the way, and look, I got the whole beige thing sort of moving now, where I have those two screws. And then on the back side here are again these two black clips that go into the beige base. And I think if we can wiggle those carefully, we can get the whole thing out here. Again, we want to proceed carefully, because if I just yank it out, there could be a spring or something. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it just sort of tips and pivots. We have to be careful about those thin tape heads there. See those little thin wires? I want to be really careful about those, because if I break those, that's going to be a world of hurt. And now we can see the two sides of the mechanism. The beige plate there that holds the two motors, and there's that little gear we were talking about that on the tape heads forum they talked about sometimes breaks or cracks. And then we see the two sort of take-up reels there as well. So there's the two motors, and there's that little gear. But the gear on this one looks like it's in good condition. Sometimes people talk about those breaking or slipping. So I'm just going to, we'll just, as we go along, just sort of examine that again. And there's the one motor. Ooh, there's part of the belt there. And it's just literally fallen apart. Off of that pulley. You can see a little bit of the belt still on that pulley. So let me just set this carefully down, and we'll take a look at the other side. Let me move the camera down. We can see the two sort of capstan flywheels here, and they both have residue of belt on them. And look at that. There's a whole like cam mechanism in the middle that's spinning around. I also saw a report on one of the forums that cam mechanism can cause problems if you don't get it back into the right place. So we're just going to have to see if that's really the case. But let's go ahead and see if we can't get... Ooh, there's more on this other little pulley. There's another little set of belt. And this is just like literally like melted goo that I'm going to have to be very careful to get off of all of these surfaces, so that we can prepare it for the new belts. I was able to order new belts for this machine before I started taking it apart, so this could be hard to get all that stuff out of there. We'll figure it out. Let's start with the capstan area and see if we can't get some of the belt material off of these big flywheels. So I'm just going to try to start with this one right here, and I'm just going to use my fingers, but this stuff is pretty gooey. I really don't want to lose pieces of it in the mechanism, and yeah, it's just all over my hands here. I don't know if fingers is the right tool necessarily to do this, but we'll just put all the pieces over here. I've got some Q-tips as well. I know you're probably shuddering looking at the Q-tips going, oh, you don't want to have Q-tip fuzz in the middle of all this mechanism, but it's what I have available. So let's just see if we can work on getting more of this stuff off of this capstan flywheel. And it's literally just, it's just coming off in little tiny bits. So I'm just going to try to get the pieces off with this screwdriver, but just by scraping and prying a little bit, and it's not really coming off too well. Again, this is not necessarily the right tool, but it's what I have available here. So just by prying and scraping here, I can try to get this stuff off. Oh yeah, see, I lost a little piece in the mechanism. I really don't want to do that. I don't want to have pieces falling in there, but I don't think I can take these flywheels off. I don't want to anyway, take them off. So let's see if we can get something. I'm going to try a little knife instead of screwdriver. That seems to work a little bit better. Still, it's pretty gooey material. It's really stuck on there. It's amazing for a rubber belt to have glued itself to the flywheel. Ugh. But it's coming off, so we'll just work on this a little bit at a time and try to scrape this material off. And you can see it's literally like liquid. It's like liquid rubber. I don't know how to describe it. Some kind of ink. It's almost turned to ink, and it's getting everywhere. So I'm just trying to finagle this stuff off as best I can. So if you find yourself ready to work on a mechanism like this, just oh great. Just lost another piece down inside the mechanism. So let's see if we can figure out a way to maybe try to keep things from falling in there. I really don't want to repeat that, and I don't want to flip the thing over and shake it right now because I don't know if any springs or anything are going to come out. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, like it's a big Post-it note, and put it underneath. There we go, underneath the flywheel. Oh, there's a little bit of a sponsorship for Autodesk. Fine makers of AutoCAD and Fusion 360, 3D Studio Max, and other fine digital content creation software. All right, so this seems to work better. I can catch all the little bits on that Post-it note and just scrape away a little bit and get the biggest parts off. Boy, it is really stuck all the way around this flywheel. No wonder the tape deck failed. So this deck was sort of given to me to take apart because it didn't work anymore, and both transports had the same issue. All four belts, there's a big wide belt around these two capstan flywheels, and then there's a smaller, skinnier belt that runs the sort of take-up mechanism. But all four belts in both mechanisms have failed. So I was able to order belts. It's very easy to do that. Found some on Amazon, and but there's a lot of other suppliers who supply belts for tape decks like this. So here's a shameless plug for another company, fixyouraudio.com, can provide belts for you. If you're looking for a specific model, you can type in the model number on their website and you can search for belts. All right, so now I'm using a little bit of contact cleaner on some Q-tips, and I'm just going to try to get more of this goo off using the Q-tips, and I'm rotating the Q-tip as I'm rubbing it on the capstan to try to put a new face or side to that Q-tip on the surface instead of just smearing that stuff all around. So I'll get a few more Q-tips here and see if we can continue to clean the capstan rollers here. Feel free to fast forward if you want through this video. But I thought I would show you just how tedious it is to clean these. And why it's important, obviously, because think about the rough surface. If there's any of that residue left on this capstan flywheel, what can happen is the belt can change speed as it rides over a bump. It will actually speed up or slow down depending on the physics involved and cause the a little bit of wow kind of speed changes as a result of some of the texture that might be left from some of that residue. So I'm doing my best to try to get all of that off and try to get a smooth surface where the new belt will have a nice surface to run on. This wheel seems to be the dirtiest and the messiest. Looks like I'm going to have to get a little bit more of the knife maybe to scrape some more of that. But let's go over this other wheel and see if we can clean that one up as well. Again, I'm sure you're turning over in your audio file graves watching me use Q-tips on this mechanism, but it's what I have. It does hold the contact cleaner very well rather than just spraying the contact cleaner all in there. I'm just spraying it on the Q-tips instead, and I can conserve some of that material. And again, just trying to get the worst of it. Yeah, get my knife back out here and get some more of these bits off. It's really stubborn. There we go. Much better. Yeah, and again, I'm trying to scrape and get any kind of the bumps off of there to make that a smooth surface, and that seems to be doing a good job. Going all the way around, trying to get any of those little rough bits. It's amazing how poorly these belts did. There's a lot of complaints about Sony's belts in these older drive units being so volatile, and they're so thin, and obviously the rubber material composition will affect the way the belts perform. I guess it's a good thing that Sony maybe doesn't make automobile tires, because we'd have a gooey situation on our tires. But this deck is several years old, many years old, so it's not surprising that the rubber fails in these, and that's always usually the first thing that'll go bad in a tape deck like this, a vintage tape deck, is that the rubber will fail. The other thing is that a lot of the lubricant that you see on that, see there's my WD-40 contact cleaner, the lubricant on some of those cams and some of the other greasy areas can also get really gunky over time. It's a good idea to use some oil on some of those mechanisms to sort of replenish that. You could use soy machine oil. Obviously, there's tape transport specific oils you can use, and I've even used 3-in-1 oil. I know in the comments, feel free to shoot me in the foot for that. But whatever you have on hand is better than nothing. Now I'm going to work on this other little gear here, this other little pulley, I should say, and it's got a really big glop of the tape around that as well. So I'm putting, it's a little hard to see, and I apologize, but I'm putting another piece of paper there, and I'm just going to try to scrape that off. And again, use the, oh God, it's literally like liquid rubber, like, I don't know, like ink, like printer ink is what it seems like gloppy kind of printer ink. But just trying to get the residue off of here and clean that up. And again, I'll use Q-tips after I get the biggest bits off with the knife to try to clean that off. And because they're white gears, it'll be easy enough to see like how if I've gotten all the residue off. Once I've scraped the biggest bits with the knife off, I can use the Q-tip with the contact cleaner to try to get more of it off. There we go. And yeah, oof. it's really quite prevalent on this object here. Sorry, my hand is in the way as I'm doing this. I have one camera. In fact, the camera I'm using to film this is a rather old camera as well. I don't know, I like vintage things. So the camera that's being used to film this is a rather old Sony. It's another gift, but it's a pretty decent little camera. And I'm using that to film this, so that's why it looks kind of vintage. I figured why not use an old camera to film, and then I had to transfer the film via FireWire into my PC, and then I'm putting the video together in DaVinci Resolve software, which is a free video editing software. It's quite robust. And that's where I'm putting it all together. So you can change the speed of clips, you can edit your clips around, and in this case, put together a whole presentation. All right, let's get some of this extra debris out of the way, and let's take a look at this last little motor. Let's see, we've got two more spots to clean. There's sort of the motor at the top, and then there's the other little belt at the bottom that also needs some cleaning. This little the belt that's all in this little white gear. See if I can zoom in. Again, so this camera, that's a downfall of this camera, is it's already quite close to the work I'm in, and this is as close as we can get when we're focusing. But you can see in the white pulley right there, there's a belt really embedded in that pulley groove. And again, that's pretty liquidy kind of material. It looks like that little pulley will pop off. So I'm going to try to use some tools to pop that off. See if I can use a little screwdriver and some pliers and try to get this little pulley removed. It's got like two little plastic tangs that are fitting into a little groove in the top of that shaft, and by prying those little white tangs out of the way, maybe I can get that to release and come off of there. So let's see. I wish I had another hand. Ooh, don't go touching that black stuff. It's nasty. Oh, there we go. All right, and you can see that little gear and the really big goop off. So getting that off of the transport unit is going to be a little bit easier to clean. And then I just don't want to disturb the other pieces there, because it looks like those other little white pieces could pop off. All right, now at the top, let's see if we can take that one apart as well. Again, that dangling sort of gear we see there is one of the ones that's supposedly cracks on this this unit. So we'll take that one off in a minute. Here's the little removed gear, and I'm going to use a screwdriver and maybe my knife to try to scrape some of this belt out. Ugh. Yeah, this is really... You see how liquid that is? It's just like... It's completely gooey. I don't know why I'm going on about this, but it's amazing that a rubber belt can just turn so poorly. Wasn't it an Andromeda strain? The movie was result of gaskets failing. Do you remember that? The original Andromeda strain, there was a jet that was flying overhead and had a gasket fail, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to try to get a Q-tip in there, but there's only so deep that Q-tip can go in. But I'll try to get the majority of it out using the Q-tips. Seems to be doing a pretty good job of getting some of that material out. I may be confusing an Outer Limits episode as well, where there was a jet that had a gasket failing. I'm not sure. Those are a long time ago. But one of those stories used a had a situation where the rubber gaskets were failing because of the situation. Anyway, there's the pulley all cleaned up. The wonders of editing, and you can see my fingers are coated in this stuff as well, so it's just getting everywhere. But I'm going to try to get that back in the unit without further ado, so that I can keep it safe and not lose the little bits. So we'll just push that back down on top and get that to sort of seat in place. There we go. So that worked out well. Now that turns us last a bit of attention to the other motor and that little dangly gear at the top. So once we've got that in, it looks like the little belt connected to this motor and this other little pulley. So it has this dangly bit here, and see if we can get that off of there so that we can I want to be careful of that head wire. Remember that little head wire down there? So I want to be really careful that I don't hurt that head wire. Last thing I want to do is break some little tiny wires and then have to fix that as well. So let's see if we can get this off of here then. So I think I can pry that little gear assembly right off the top, because I'm not going to be able to get a Q-tip in there to clean and be effective in any way. So let's see if I could just pry this little oh, yep, there we go. Whoop, whoop. There's one little gear, and there's a spring there I don't want to disturb. Oh, and the rest of that just slides right off of there. So that's handy. And then there's that last little pulley, and I'm going to try to pry that off of the motor. Of course, I should have marked where that was vertically, but I'm just going to try to get it off of there without hopefully making more of a mess. Okay, that worked well. All right, and then we're going to clean this little pulley the same way and then get it reinstalled. So here's the cleaned pulley, and I'm going to put that back on the motor shaft. And again, I'm not really sure how deep to put it on, so I'm just going to put it all the way on and then try to leave a little bit of rest. It looks like there's a little bit more cleaning to do around that base plate before I get the pulley on, because there's no sense in trying to put the pulley back on there and still have that kind of gunked up. So let's clean up a little bit of that area around there. There's like some little side tangs that hold that gear mechanism in place, and it lets it rotate back and forth. This is the auto reverse gear, apparently, that can switch directions. And so I know that this is, again, one of the areas that fails on this mechanism. So hopefully when we get all this back together, it's going to work and function. All right, so that seemed to be a little bit cleaned up. And see if we can get this pulley back on. There. Okay, a little more. All right. Yeah, I just want to make sure that that's spinning and not like too far. Like I don't want to make sure it's binding in there. And then let's get this little hanging mechanism back on place. And it just sort of sets in there. Oh, there's a little bit of more gunk on that mechanism. So see if we can clean that off as well. And then here's the new belts. So I think that I'll get the belt on first, the little belt, before I put that gear mechanism on. I think I'm going to have a little bit more success if I do that. So let's take this belt, and again, it goes from the motor to that other little pulley that we cleaned just a minute ago. So, and it seems like if I just pull it off to the side here and hook it on those little posts, that'll sort of hold it in place. Yeah, that looks good. All right. Yeah, so I think putting that belt in place will help us to I think that would be really hard to get the belt on after this little gear mechanism is on, is the point. So let's get that hanging gear mechanism back in place, and then we'll see if we can't get the little gear on. And you can see there's little stops that keep that from going too far as that wiggles back and forth. Again, I think that's part of the auto reverse mechanism. All right, look at that. Set that little gear back in place. All right. And again, I'm just making sure that it's not too far set down in it, and it seems to be functioning. That's good. All right. Now we have to figure out how to get the big belt on and how that can get situated so that we can get the mechanism put back together. At this point, I'm not going to lubricate anything because I just want to see if, in other words, I don't want to spend too much time in here if I can avoid it, and I'll take it back apart if I need to. Famous last words, right? Let's put the belt on here between these two capstan pulleys, and then it's got to connect to the motor. So I'm just going to pull it out and see if I can hook it on something over here to temporarily hold that belt in place while I get the two plates back together. Yeah, I guess that's okay. Yeah, so so there's our two belts positioned, and see if I can't get this lifted back up in place and get this whole plate situated where I can just adjust, make sure that's a little bit better. I was sort of looking at how that other pulley was positioned, so I wanted to make sure the belt is at least in a position where I can grab it as we flip this plate back over. And remember this beige plate sort of hooks on these little hooks on the back of the mechanism. There's two like black hooks back here. So I want to try to get the plate, gotta watch those head wires. I want to get the plate hooked onto these black little, these little black hooks back here, right there and there, and get that situated. Make sure, again, the head wires are out of the way. And then, now I got to figure out how to get the belts settled and onto the other matching pulleys, and then get the plate to all settle into place. So let's see here. Yep. It doesn't want to go all the way down all the way, probably because it's coming at it as an angle. There's that black post right in the middle of that beige plate right there, and that goes up into that hole where that screw went. And so those need to situate on top of each other, but they're not going to be able to go in until I can get these belts sort of settled in place and sort of come as much straight down as I can on here. So I'm going to try to just get it close, making sure those hooks are still in there. Yep. I don't want to force it. Again, I don't want those belts to pop off or do anything weird. So let's just see if we can. I think the belts are sort of in the way. So I need to get the belts to be situated onto the matching pulleys. And so let's see if we can't do this right now to get that belt settled in, and the big belt as well. It's sort of in the way of this piece of plastic. So I'm going to have to, let's start with that one. And I'm going to use my screwdriver here. I don't have any kind of belt hook, but I'm just going to try to hook it on the pulley of the motor and get it sort of settled in there. Yes, that was a sharp knife blade I was using to situate that pulley. And all right, now let's see if we can get this other tinier pulley settled onto the small one right there. It's got some gooey all over my screwdriver too. This black stuff is everywhere. I've been finding little spots on the floor and those little bits of belts. I even found some on my pants where I left a blob that has escaped. So there we go. Let's see if we can get this belt onto that pulley. There we go. That looks good. All right, now. Yeah, it seems like it's almost settled in place. Seems to be the hooks are in place. Both of those hooks are in place. The head wires are out of the way and tucked in where they should be. The front, it looks like the place where those two screws go are settled in. The door mechanism seems to be okay. So I think it's okay. We could see if we could get the screws back in the top post. And let's see if we can get those two front ones in as well. And let's see if we can get this mechanism back into the unit and see what happens. So remember, I had to sort of swing this circuit board out of the way and then get that long screw in the post at the top. That's good. And then we have the two screws in the front. And don't forget, we need to get this circuit board resituated and replugged in and on that little white plastic post so it sort of spins back in place. I'm just making sure there's nothing else catching up on it there. There we go. So there's the sort of ribbon cable gets pushed in between the two circuit boards, and then that little white post sort of snaps back in place. Yeah, it's a little wiggly, but I guess it'll do. It's also amazing how big these mechanisms are. If you open up a little Walkman or some other device, how much smaller they are with all those pieces very compressed into a tinier place. Over the years, they really did refine the way mechanisms work. But let's go ahead and see if we can get the door released and get the mechanism back into the faceplate. The reverse is really just putting it all back in the way you got it out. So we're going to feed the door back in here and get all the screws back in the base plate and that other little top plate and make sure everything's sort of lined up. And then we'll repair the second mechanism in the same way, get the belts taken out of that other mechanism, and then remounted, and then we'll put the whole thing back together and see what we get. Here we can see the pieces being screwed back together, the 4 screws that hold the mechanism into the front plate, and then got the door there. Oh yeah, don't forget we need to get that little plate on the front there. There we go. And screw it in there. And then we will put the unit all back together and see what kind of progress there is as to getting a functional transport going. Again, these are pretty finicky mechanisms. Obviously, I took a little liberty with, not lubricating and things like that, but I wanted to make sure that we could get the whole thing at least mechanically functioning, and we'll take it back apart if we need to.